Before I get started with our panel, let me just lay out what we mean by the collaborative ecosystem. So FinTech, by definition almost, is a marriage between finance and technology. And it has a widespread impact and applications across all sectors in almost every single business in whichever sector uses financial services. Yet one of the differences in financial services is that it is kind of regulated heavily by both the federal as well as the state. And this is something that I think that we need to take into account as we think about innovating in this ecosystem. One of the other things that I think separates financial services from other areas is that there is a lot of behavioral impact or behavioral issues that impact this area. And also the fact that you have to make decisions under a lot of information asymmetry, under a lot of uncertainty. And that is part of the excitement, and that is part of the challenge that we face here. So in order to navigate these issues, in order to kind of create meaningful products and innovate in an inclusive way across the entire economy, we need to think about how to operate collaboratively and broadly with every single stakeholder in the economy. So in yesterday's talk, you heard Secretary Keneally and Mike Fanning mention a little bit about what we are doing in Massachusetts with the FinTech Working Group. And this is a hugely collaborative effort on parts of the large financial institutions in the state, innovative startups in the state, universities that participate on both research, teaching, as well as upskilling the workforce, as well as other agencies and facilitators who are connected to the financial services ecosystem in a way that really makes this a very connected affair. So without further ado, I think let's introduce our guests who are very important members of this ecosystem. So Mona, Luke, and Vasilios, why don't you start off by introducing a little bit about yourselves as well as how you fit into this ecosystem.
Great, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I guess I'm here with two hats. The first one is I run Fidelity Labs, which is Fidelity's business incubator. My other hat is now since, I guess, over 5 years or so, I have been on the board of the FinTech Sandbox and sort of on the front seat of watching this whole ecosystem really blossom.
Thank you. Luke?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name's Luke Lennon. Pronouns are they and he. I lead marketing and community for MassChallenge FinTech and have been with the program since we launched in 2018. Our program is very collaborative, minded. We're a partnership model, so we match FinTech startups with enterprise partners across asset management, insurance, banking, and other sectors, really with one, the short-term goal of producing outcomes and results for both the startups and the enterprises, but two, more long-term, really trying to transform the financial services industry through innovation. Our applications are open now, actually through October 8th. And yeah, super excited to be on the panel today.
Great, thank you. Vasilios?
Hi, Vasilios Roussos. I'm the managing director of the DCU FinTech Innovation Center, which is a nonprofit FinTech accelerator helping FinTech startups go from POC stage of development into production and beyond. We do that by working with engaged financial institutions, primarily DCU, the credit union underwriter and sponsor of the center. We've been at it since 2014, helping connect institutions and FinTechs together, kind of rebranded in 16 under this accelerator model. and are happy to help, work around some of the same goals as MassChallenge and FinTech Sandbox, and help bring the industry and entrepreneurs forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Vasilios. So I'm Debarshi Nandy. Hello, I'm a professor at the Brandeis International Business School. So to get us started, why don't we just try and define what we mean by collaboration and whether or not collaboration in financial technology is any different than, let's say, if it might be in services or manufacturing and so on. Mona, we could start with you, and then Luke and Vasilios.
So that's a good question. I don't know, with the world becoming more and more digital and software-based and data-driven, to what extent there is something really different from financial services. Because, in my prior role before joining Fidelity, I had seen in other domain this sort of similar collaboration emerge, like in legal tech, for instance, between large organizations, and then a rise of a lot of innovation in the startup space. I think what's exciting, obviously, in financial services is that there is now an incredible possibility to innovate on modern platforms like cloud, and increasingly gain insights from data that creates opportunities for a lot of innovation that's happening in the startup ecosystem, and for large financial services to participate in that ecosystem as well. So I see that collaboration increasing and happening. And many years ago, when the FinTech Sandbox launched, we had seen some really fantastic examples of those in even the first class of our beta class of our FinTech Sandbox. We had partnered back in the day with a startup called Elsen at Thomson Reuters, now called Refinitiv, and found a lot of value in it. I see that ecosystem and collaboration opportunities really increase as there is actually more specialization and more ways to create components to build more value added in the ecosystem.
Fantastic. So before I go to you, Luke, I just want to remind everybody who's watching that there is a Q&A box, and you can actually send us your questions live during this session, and we will definitely get to them. So Luke and Vasilios, could you touch upon how you see collaboration in this space?
Yeah, so I'm happy to go first, and I agree with what Mona said 100%. I think, Debarshi, you touched on some of the unique challenges or distinct challenges kind of at the beginning of the session around compliance, regulation, things like that. And I do think, particularly in the past few months, if we've taken anything from those months, it's really been, that in order to grow and change and progress, there's a lot of learning to be done, but there's also a lot of unlearning. And I think that really applies to financial services and FinTech, just in terms of looking at these really, older entrenched institutions with a lot of structures and systems in place that, really require some change. And so that unlearning and learning, I think, is key to collaboration here. And with that, I think, given that financial services touches upon, every aspect of an individual's life, and really does not exist in a vacuum, and is a necessity for all all individuals. I think there's a lot of opportunity for cross industry collaboration, more so perhaps than other industries, but two, the potential for impact is huge.
Excellent.
Thanks, Luke. So, Vasilios, I was just going to say that, given your work in the, the FinTech working group that Secretary Keneally and Mike Fanning referred to yesterday, your insights into what you might be doing there, perhaps you could bring that out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the center in the working group are really focused on how we can enhance upon all of the efforts that Mona and Luke were just mentioning about, and really bring that to the broader Massachusetts-based economy. And one of the things, as we think about these challenges to innovation within a regulated environment, there are pure innovation challenges when working with folks outside of your institutions. There's the regulatory challenges, right? And so what we want to do is help break those down. So how can we get fintechs and the broader financial services and fintech buying enterprises of Massachusetts to connect in a more effective way that brings comfort to all in this process? And some of the ways that we've identified doing that is that there is comfort in community. And so what we really want to help establish is a community of these fintech interested, fintech curious organizations who are either beginning or have begun their pathway of working in working with fintechs is basically just saying we need external innovation and new products that aren't currently in the market. And fintechs are poised very well to deliver that. However, as mentioned, there's challenges there. And there are challenges that can certainly be overcome, sometimes with the shared knowledge of the group, sometimes with sort of opinions and insights from outside partners, and sometimes by just having the group in the committee that we're working on and the forum that will be launching is going to help bring people together under the right light and under the right pathways to make it as easy as possible to identify prospective fintechs, but also the curation process, the onboarding process are some of the goals that we want to work towards. So
thank you, Vasilios.
Yep. So my ask is for any of the listeners in the audience who are enterprises and are really enthused by what you're hearing today, to reach out to be part of this initiative and help bring Massachusetts into the leadership role of fintech innovation in the country, as was outlined yesterday.
Great, thank you so much. So, you know, the nature of this collaboration as is happening across the different players, and I think that it's going great so far based on all the type of things that I'm hearing from all of you. What, if you might point out, is an area or perhaps other areas where you would love them to engage more or engage further, or where there is a need to engage further in this?
I can take that.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
If that's okay, I used to have the opportunity to look more globally and do some comparative sort of observations, and I think there is possibly more opportunities for us to accelerate the public-private partnerships. I was thinking about the regulatory sandbox set up in the UK a few years ago that seemed to have had the great effect of really driving a great RegTech ecosystem out in the UK. I'm not sure what the equivalent for us would be here. The other is that I think, what I'm really energized by is the universities, like giving more visibility to the sort of application of the great skill sets that are coming out of the university, so that right off the bat, the ideas are can start looking a little bit more like, solutions to real problems. And I'd say last year I did I judged a competition at MIT, and I was actually pretty blown away by how practical some of the ideas were. So I think, something good is happening in that sort of interaction. So maybe even more of that, would really be exciting, because we do have, in addition to great financial services, we have incredible universities here in Boston where we can really sort of encourage that entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mona. So that's fabulous. And I think that, yes, sorry, Luke, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, sure thing. So, yeah, 100% agree with what Mona spoke to, and I think we're really grateful to be partners of both, DCU and Fidelity, and work closely with both of those organizations. And I think it really speaks to this ecosystem development mindset that's really key to the future of fintech. Just one example that I like to share is we had a startup in our first cohort, Pinkaloo. Actually, they were on yesterday as part of the demo days, and from their work with Eastern Bank, they were actually in a really good position to, this year when COVID hit, launch the Massachusetts COVID-19 Relief Fund with Eastern Bank and with Governor Baker and First Lady Baker. And so they've raised over, the organization has raised over 30 million to date. And I don't think that would have been possible without that collaboration from the beginning and an understanding of the fintech capabilities, and also, the larger organization's capabilities and strategies. So I think that speaks to the power of collaboration 100%. But I think as we look forward in terms of areas where there's more opportunity for collaboration or more need, I really think it drills down to diversity, equity, and inclusion, both in terms of funding and supporting founders from underrepresented backgrounds, but also in thinking about how we're building our financial products and services with an inclusive mindset across race, gender, ethnicity, disability, geography, and what have you. So I think that there's a big opportunity there, and MassChallenge is taking steps towards really drilling down to that and understanding what our role is in that space as it relates to fintech and financial services. But I'm excited to see what we can all do together on that front.
Yeah.
Thanks. Vasilios, do you want to, do you have any thoughts on this?
I do, and kind of answering Elizabeth's question number 5 below as well, because I think it complements, which is how can we make enterprises move quicker in adopting fintech solutions? And I think the issue, there are unique challenges depending on the phase of the startup and the phase of the innovation maturity of the organization. And so while we can't go into each of those phases in depth here and talk about them, I think that it is unique. And what I mean by phases is there's the ideation or concept phase, there's the pilot or proof of concept phase, there's the MVP, that initial product, there's the first real kind of market ready product, and then there's scaling that product beyond that. And so what I think it comes down to is awareness and honesty about where you are in the process on both sides of the table. And are you institutionally ready to engage with your partner at their level? So financial institutions, for their behalf, have to right size the scope of the product, and therefore the risk of the product, the cost of the product, the operational compliance, regulatory support that they're going to need to launch this product for their level of enterprise risk, their level of sophistication in working with a fintech, and there's just experience that needs to happen to get there. And certainly they can partner with organizations to support them, whether it's the accelerators that we've all been talking about, or the new Mass FinTech collaborative effort. But what I would say is, from my observations of working with 80 plus fintechs at the center, the ones that succeed statistically most often are the ones who sort of tackle the immediate problem ahead of them and just work on that continuous marching forward, right, to gain an experience. And I would say that philosophy needs to take place for both the startups and the institutions, because equally, startups tend to solve or go after the goals of tomorrow, rather than solving what they need to today to prepare themselves to achieve those goals tomorrow. And I think that that's the biggest challenge when working in a regulatory environment, in a conservative environment. So I know that was generic, but hopefully it answered the question.
Thanks, Vasilios. So, perhaps Mona, we would love your take on this as well. You have both hats, from your FinTech Sandbox hat as well as your, hat wearing the Fidelity hat. What would Elizabeth's question was that for FinTech providers of, tech, how do we get quicker adoption into financial institutions?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, it's a complicated, long answer, but the real aspect that Vasilios brought up is really true. I think from a startup side, you have to have a really strong understanding of what your go-to-market is. It's sometimes they're more of a solution looking for a problem, and I think the other piece is to really just figure out with great discipline, what is the use case that makes your business? Because, if you come in with some really great capabilities to a large organization, there's probably 500 problems or 50 problems you can solve, but we don't know which one makes your business. That's your job, right? So there is kind of this two-way street, which is, you need to have at your table the kind of leadership found the founders to sort of be like, this is my vision and this is what I'm going to really focus on execution on the first phase so that I really prove it out. That sometimes I feel like, having been on both sides, by the way, having worked for 10 years in startups, it's not always them, it could be us. Like we may not be having, all our ducks in a row. But I also think on the other side of it, there's got to be some more formal programs like Vasilios' program to really help that partnership be in place. And I think when they work really well is when you find a champion in a large organization to really see where the value proposition is going. And I think we have some really great success story on our end at Fidelity. I think we'll see increasingly more of those. It's a lot easier when, both sides are pretty clear about their vision or what their, requirements are for the collaboration. I think that probably was a generic statement, but it actually proves out to be quite helpful. I don't know if that helps. I think from the FinTech Sandbox perspective, it's just been amazing to see the kind of quality of startups that are coming through the program and then seeing where they're headed. I think one of the most humbling realization for us has been how much has changed in the last 5 years, which is actually not that big of a period. And so sort of looking at what the next 5 years can bring is pretty exciting. And to Luke's point, this moment in time is bringing a set of, significant shifts that can just be seen as massive opportunity for digitization, for reinventing an inclusive, financial system, for thinking about impact investing and sustainable investing in a way that's actually transformational.
Thank you, Mona. That's amazing. So I think, if I had to kind of think about one thing, I guess encouraging efficient communication, throughout the process is probably a good place to start, where people get quickly on the same page. On the same kind of note, I think there are a couple of questions here that I would like to throw out. One is, I think all three of you can comment on this from your own perspectives. So the question was asked about MassChallenge, but I think it applies to everybody, which is, what kind of fintechs do you think that Massachusetts or Boston should specialize in? I mean, should it be in asset management, where we kind of have there is a historic precedent? Should it be across the board? Should it be, what are the focus areas, so to say?
I'll start with that.
Do you want to start us off on this?
Yeah, definitely. And so, MassChallenge, we take a really broad definition of fintech that includes insurtech, it includes payments, across the board. And as it relates to, where Boston should focus on, personally, I'm a firm believer in keeping that broad, because what we've seen is that that really enables creativity and a true path towards innovation. For example, in the past few years, we've had traditional partners across asset management, insurance, and banking, as I mentioned, but we've also had partners like Walmart and the MBTA transit system here in Boston that are really looking to work with fintechs and really looking to use fintech solutions and apply them to their businesses. So I do think that, and kind of, I guess, conversely, we're also seeing startups that may not traditionally be considered a true fintech in the definition that, maybe was more stringent a few years ago. But now we're seeing so many companies really able to enter the financial services industry and apply their technologies there. So I'm all for a broad scope of fintech, and I think it really encourages a lot of cross-industry collaboration and opportunities for real impact.
And I'll jump in with a slightly different.
What's your take on this?
Yeah, thank you, Debarshi. So I think Luke is very right, and it's along the concept of, I think in traditional venture capital, there's always this idea of if you're going to have a great innovation ecosystem, you need to bring in universities that generate the talent, the capital for the money, and then large incumbent institutions who are customers and have a lot of sort of know-how and expertise within the sector. And I think Massachusetts has those ingredients, and bring them together under the sort of MassChallenge model is one really effective way to do that. Another way to look at this problem is to say, let's look at sort of platform technologies that can be applied agnostic to the sector. And how can Massachusetts be really effective in those, which I think will catapult us long term. And one of those sectors is AI. I think MIT has galvanized around AI. We've seen a tremendous amount of really fantastic talent coming out of MIT, both because of the specific AI initiatives complemented by their entrepreneurial support ecosystem. And I think that as you develop AI technical talent that can do fantastic things with that technology, those individuals can move from sector, whether it's, working at Wayfair and Amazon and retail, or whether it's working in healthcare, or whether it's working in fintech. And the ability to sort of drive new solutions in one industry and bring the best of those learnings to another, I think is another highly effective way to drive innovation. And I think that by utilizing that talent, that experience, and our infrastructure around AI, that supporting that specifically for fintech will really be a huge boost to our economy. One of the things we haven't mentioned on this call, but it's talked a lot about in fintech innovation, is front office versus back office. And to deliver that fantastic front office digital experience that we're really, talking about a lot because of this COVID environment, it means that the back office has to be fixed. And so AI is one major way to improve that back office experience to get us where the market needs to be and is today.
Perfect. So, Mona, as we come to you, perhaps incorporating one of the ideas about how universities or research can actually help fintechs grow faster or develop, bring ideas to the market faster. In this context, might also be kind of relevant to bring to the forefront. That's another question we have from one of our listeners.
Yeah, so I have just experienced over the years really loving the sort of interaction between universities, the startup ecosystem, and the large organizations. One story that I often use as an example is, I had in my previous role, we had, engaged with the predecessor of the AI college called the Big Data Initiative at MIT, because 10 years ago, that was the hype word. And, we connected with this research project by Michael Stonebreaker that really actually seemed really promising to solve a technical challenge we had in our back office at Thomson Reuters. That conversation and that interaction actually really helped shape one of the early use cases of a Boston startup called Tamer. And I think there's lots of really cool examples like this where I think there's great startups that come out of universities. I think there's immense amount of talent. My favorite thing is my summer interns, that come from all the great universities, frankly, a lot of them from the Boston area and beyond. So, finding great talent that is really, looking forward to this first high reward, high learning opportunity job is kind of great for a startup to recruit from. I had that opportunity leaving college, many years ago to join a startup, and it changed my life for the better. So, I think what's really just needed is hopefully getting back to this, informal ways people collided, which is so hard to do now on video. But again, so many great opportunities to find, co-founders, great talent, as well as really connecting different disciplines, which is frankly how innovation happens when you connect all these different expertise together.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't agree more with that statement. I mean, it is the cross-fertilization of ideas across different areas that lead to great innovation. And many of the universities actually in the Boston area and state they all have programs that actually facilitate this interaction with startups and work with startups in some ways. At Brandeis, we certainly do. We actually have a program with MassChallenge where we partner with startups in early stages and work with them on different projects. The general idea of this collaborative ecosystem is to bring all these elements that already sort of exist in the ecosystem on a common platform, so that we actually increase the efficiency of these interactions tremendously. And that's sort of the idea of developing this collaboration. So, Luke, do you have any insights onto, other than perhaps the program with us, how you have interacted with other, perhaps, universities in the MassChallenge ecosystem?
Yeah, so MassChallenge as a whole really works with universities and colleges across Massachusetts, through our internships or connecting students with startups in our ecosystem. Definitely a variety of initiatives that we've undertaken over the years with students. I think we're particularly excited about our relationship with Brandeis and, seeing it as really mutually beneficial in so many ways. And I think a big question that, I think is related to this topic that I hear from students often is, what can I do to get into FinTech, or what should I be learning? How should I enter this industry? And I think what's exciting about FinTech is that, because, it's always changing. It's developing, like, as Mona said, like, even like 5 years ago, like, it was very different than, what it is now. Right. And so that opportunity to enter an industry that is really dynamic and that you're able to learn a lot in a short amount of time, and, also explore certain, applications of FinTech that might be, more aligned with additional interests, such as like, student debt or like investor advisor tools, right? And so that, like, diversity across FinTech, I think, is really appealing to students, and it allows, I think, for us to welcome in a variety of students, not just necessarily those with a strictly technical background, or those that, maybe have financial services experience. I think FinTech really embraces a variety of students, which is exciting, and that's what we've seen so far in, in our work with Brandeis, for example.
Oh, thanks, Luke. Just shifting gears a little bit, there's a question that came in from one of our listeners about how do you think financial institutions should organize itself for innovation? And I'm assuming that we are talking about incumbent large financial institutions and whether or not there is any particular model for success. Vasilios, do you want to start us off on that?
Yeah, sure. I think that there are parallels. And so one parallel is change management. So, in the 80s, it was, whether it was Six Sigma or lean manufacturing or other models like that, the idea was that organizationally, folks had to change and think about how they operate in their processes differently. I think innovation is that of the future. And so so if we look at those models, what were some of the essential ingredients there that we can apply to fintechs, which is just, like I said, external innovation. And one of the number one requirements for a process like that to be effective is executive sponsorship. And I would put it beyond sponsorship, but real leadership. And I think that ultimately, if an organization is going to embrace innovation effectively, it needs that high-level, true buy-in and support so that employees know that at the highest level, the organization's got their backs. And the organization is sort of defining risk a little bit differently. And so I think that is certainly something that we've seen separate a lot of the institution's success, those that have it versus those that don't. And I think the really exciting thing for Massachusetts is that you are seeing that level of engagement happening across the board in all fintech sectors. And so I think that's one. I think two, you absolutely need somebody who's thinking about innovation. It can be a driver, it can be a sponsor, exactly as Mona had spoken to earlier. Now, how that exactly happens, there's different ways to get to the end goal. So some people have dedicated innovation efforts, some people have sort of a fintech expert, some people incorporate into marketing or digital strategy. I don't think that matters, right? What does matter is that there is somebody who is a knowledge expert in the area, can appropriately calculate risk or find folks who can stand up for the risk of an organization. So why this fintech over the hundreds of others that may or may not fail, in the ecosystem? Why have we chosen these? And then that person to have the influence and the power to drive that engagement all the way through to the end. Because what we often see in fintech, as you can imagine, is the process starts and goes several innings, and then at some point, somebody with influence and power or a stamp that can block things gets involved in the process. Right? And whether that is legal or compliance, right, or finance, it can be very different in every institution. But what matters is that that sponsor can drive the process throughout the organization, get people on board, kind of think ahead and solve ahead for these issues. And again, constantly remind people how how we're redefining risk and remodeling risk for a fintech versus an incumbent vendor. And I think that those ingredients are the initial key ingredients to get an organization going. After that, then there's all of the support infrastructure and educational components about how to make the organization more mature, be more effective, go earlier down the stream or broaden its scope. But I think you need somebody with entrepreneurial heart and vision and an executive to backstop them.
Vasilios, if I can jump in there too, I couldn't agree more. Sure. That's our model is very much what you just described, and I think that that's where we see the most success. All of our partnerships at MassChallenge FinTech have executive senior buy-in and sponsorship, as well as that day-to-day point person that really is the quarterback, of the relationship with the startup and really helps see it through and connect that startup to the appropriate people. I think just to drill in on a couple points that you made, I'd say the aspect of really approaching fintech startups with a different lens than a traditional vendor is really key in having those conversations that can get to that go or no go decision much more quickly, but also the larger institution having a good understanding of what they are willing to be flexible on or adaptable on, and what maybe is more set in stone. And so having that understanding and leading conversations more with that, because at the end of the day, on both sides, really the ultimate resource for an entrepreneur, but also for these financial services firms, is really time. And so how can we get to those decisions sooner, and really be upfront and transparent with the entrepreneur from the onset? And similarly, from the startup side of things, I think that them coming in, approaching the partnership or conversation more just like that, a conversation, versus really trying to sell hard as a vendor. Often having those conversations and really trying to understand the financial services institution's needs and wants as well is really key in this kind of ideally, mutually beneficial relationship and partnership that could grow.
Thank you, Luke. Mona, just coming back to you on this issue, from your perspective, what are the key elements?
And I'll answer another question that, maybe in the process, Jim asked about elements of world-class collaborative ecosystem that Massachusetts may not have, or, sort of the gaps.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I actually think we have all the elements. The one thing perhaps we could use a little bit more of is, and I don't have recent data, is perhaps more injection or focus of venture funding, which tends to be pretty concentrated in New York and Silicon Valley, but maybe things will change. But I think all the other elements really are here. I mean, some of it is, many years ago we were talking about this with the governor's initiative around big data. As part of it is cultural. We're not, really, we're quiet doers and less sort of screaming how great everything is. And it's possible that actually we have all the great elements of it here already. So I'm pretty optimistic that this is really more about continuing to foster the good success story, perhaps tell them a little bit more visibly to encourage more participation would really get us there. Vasilios was spot on, same with Luke, you need the champion. At the same time, what I think is worth talking about is that we're possibly going to, this is a personal hypothesis, not endorsed by anybody around me or that I'm affiliated to, is that we might be in a process of a sort of a shift of business model, right? So there's been a lot of really great models around SaaS, and maybe the AI ecosystem is in a different model and it's not per seat, and you're starting to look at all these components and how they impact the business model. So if you're a startup and you're making some assumptions of what is the sort of growth and scale revenue you can expect from your vendor, perhaps there is some conversation about validating those assumptions to make sure that they're realistic. So maybe 90%, I'm sure 90% of the vetoes are real, but perhaps some of the vetoes are signal from the market that something may not be viable in the business model. And I guess the way I often look at this stuff is assume best intention. If you're getting a veto, there is a learning opportunity. In my startup years, the vetoes were super frustrating, but there were definitely signals from the market for us to think about. So, but, with that being said, I think Luke knows we have a system where we're really deliberate about having this point of contact with my colleagues that are, partnering with MassChallenge and having the senior executive and sort of thinking about all that championing. I'm still saying, every no is a learning experience that, you could take with some value from. At least that's my sense of it. So.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think I totally agree with your thoughts on the financing side. There is actually data to shows that we somewhat are lacking, particularly in the initial stage financing in the fintech sector relative to New York or San Francisco, the West Coast. But however, our goal is that we definitely are setting up this whole ecosystem so that it becomes attractive for early stage investors to come in. And as we develop these newer models, or learn from these rejections that might be happening to adoption of business models that that may not be the future, I think that is in itself going to create opportunities for investment from venture capitalists. So there's another question that actually brings up a very interesting idea, and to direct it towards MassChallenge and DCU, as to whether or not you are open to startups from outside the US. And perhaps we can look at this with a slightly more generalized lens, in the sense that, one of the things, Luke, you touched upon was about being more inclusive in our efforts in order to attract entrepreneurs who are coming in and providing them with the support that they need. And from the talent perspective, the universities have a huge amount of international talent that is here. And historically, international talent has actually also contributed greatly to the US innovation ecosystem. So, bringing all of these together, how can we think more globally and accept more, or, think about incorporating more of these global ideas into the Massachusetts-Boston ecosystem, and at the same time kind of provide opportunities for the international talent to come in here?
Yeah, so I'm happy to go first on that one. MassChallenge is proudly a global organization. We're based in Boston, and we were started here, but we have locations all over the world, in Israel, Mexico, Switzerland, as well as others in the US. And so I think for us, we've always seen that as a real advantage and strength that allows us to one, build a bit bigger network, but two, to use that network to, support each other with entrepreneurs really being at the center of that. And so for MassChallenge FinTech specifically, we do accept applications from all over the world. Last year in the cohort, we had several Canadian startups as well as a startup from the UK. And we also, truthfully see the program for international startups as potentially a way for them to enter the US market. For us, we really value that geographic diversity, in terms of helping the startups learn from each other, but also helping, the financial services institutions learn, and just really fostering that community. And then, in terms of the question about just more broadly, how do we create this more inclusive ecosystem? I think, we've talked a lot about Boston, and the focus has been on Boston in this conversation, and that's really important. And I think as we think about how we want to grow and develop Boston and what we want Boston to look like as a fintech hub 5 years from now, I don't think I don't think we can afford to be insular. I think that we really do need to think about, internationally, but also nationally, who are we attracting to Boston and why? And, how can we use that variety of perspectives to really help grow this ecosystem here that we have in the city?
Yeah, and I think as far as the sentiments there, us from the DCU Center follow right in line with that inclusivity of trying to bring people, as much as we're trying to raise the bar for Massachusetts fintech ecosystem, to raise the profile in a way that isn't in our DNA, as Mona mentioned. as far as the DCU FinTech Innovation Center, we started off as a program for Boston entrepreneurs and centered on sort of Boston institutions exclusively. Part of the reason for that is that we've got 9,000 square feet of office space that helps build that community that Luke was mentioning, and it's a year of free space for startups to help build a network and a community with each other. As time has gone by, we've opened it up to folks on a selective basis. So January of this past year, our winter cohort, we did accept several non-Massachusetts-based companies, including non-US and Canada. The line for us is that those applicants need to be focused on the US market while meeting the rest of our criteria. We're a small organization, so to be impactful, we need to be hyper-focused. And what we really measure for our applicants, not only how good they are, but how good we can be to them. How much can we help them? And so having a U.S. market focus can help us be that much more impactful than working with organizations and entrepreneurs who are focused on the non-U.S. market. And as far as application deadlines for the Innovation Center, due to COVID, we did kick back our normal January, July start cycles. So for our next cycle, applications will be opening up in a couple of months. Please go to dcufintech.org FinTech to sign up and get the announcement for that.
And ours are October 8th.
Luke, your applications are currently on, I believe.
Yeah, October 8th at noon Eastern is the deadline, and I'm happy to speak directly with any fintech startup that's interested. Luke at MassChallenge.org.
Thank you, Luke. Mona, could you tell us from your perspective of how perhaps from the talent side, whether or not the large body of international students that we have here at the universities, how can they get integrated into this ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'm one of them. I came from France and managed to join that ecosystem, so I feel like it's a very personal story for me. And I think, to pick up on Luke's point and a question we got from Sarah about, inclusiveness, the reality of it is that we need to be able to support a way to keep the talent here, which is perhaps outside of this group's control. But there are certainly great ways to engage the talent through. I think one of the things we should probably find a way to do better, frankly, is, creating visibility to all those opportunities to join a startup at the academic level. As Debarshi, you have the large firms coming and doing recruiting. It's pretty expensive to do. I feel like we're at a point now with digital tools where we can possibly create that two-sided marketplace a bit more efficiently. I'm not sure how to do that, but my personal experience was I went to work for Chase Manhattan because they came on campus, and later on joined a startup that I would have never heard about, on campus. And when you're a student, you don't see those opportunities. From a diversity and inclusion perspective, I think, the most important sort of thing to note is that the talent is here. You just have to expand your network and think about it differently, and not just ask the 3 or 5 people or 10 people around you. Really cast a wide net and work at it, and it creates just these incredibly powerful teams that has, if anybody ever asked me what has made you successful, if that's, a story, I will say, I just have been so lucky to recruit incredible people and work with incredible people. And oftentimes there are people I didn't know, and I went and cast a really wide net and asked my contacts and went further down the knowledge graph of my world to find people that were different and thinking differently and ethnically different from me. And so I would really encourage to do that. I think in this moment in time, it might be your edge for competitive advantage. And it also feels like a non-negotiable that we all do that unlearning Luke is talking about, and reflect on how can we create, actually financial services that look like the consumer of those services.
Mm-hmm. I think, we have roughly around 4 minutes left, and in the time that we have left, I would like to touch upon a question that we have about how can FinTech impact some of the other areas. And let's say we look into some of the big questions that we have today about in healthcare, in financial inclusion, in climate change, related to these things. What kind of, if any, effort have you seen in your experience? So Vasilios, Luke, Mona, all of you kind of look at very early stage ideas. Is there a trend in that direction?
I'll jump in, try and be real quick to leave room for the others. Absolutely, Debarshi, and on Sarah's question, which I think was an excellent question, creativity comes from the intersection of kind of different fields. And one of those different fields are sectors, as Sarah mentioned, kind of health tech coming into FinTech, or whether it's a diversity and kind of approach. I think it's critical. And more specifically, to answer the questions, financial health is one of these security type sectors that influence people's lives all the time. And so how can we work across industries and think about how those different areas are impacting people's financial lives? An example of that is a company called FinTech Health, which is a startup and a graduate now of our program, who is focused on financial rewards for health-related issues, beginning with smoking cessation. They are becoming real experts in how to provide financial rewards and frame those rewards. Like, I'm not only just saving some money or getting money back for quitting smoking, it's going into a fund that's going to provide capital for my daughter's wedding. And every time I open the app, I see a picture of, my daughter there. And that reinforcement is going to end up creating not only the health goals that I want, but ultimately have a major impact on my personal financial life.
Financial, right. So Vasilios, in the interest of time, if I might give Luke like a quick 20-second chance to say something on this.
Yeah, hey, I think it comes down to the fact that wealth is power. And so what are we doing to help individuals build wealth or break down the barriers to wealth building? I think that intersects with a variety of industries, from telecom to transportation mobility to prop tech, right? So there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration, as Vasilios mentioned. And I think we just really need to think about financial services with thinking about everything that surrounds it from that individual perspective.
Thank you, Luke. I think we are kind of out of time today, so thank to all of our great speakers for joining us today, and thanks to all of you for listening.